Former Senator David Perdue announced he will be running in the Republican primary for Georgia governor, challenging incumbent Governor Brian Kemp. In an announcement video released Monday, Perdue said he's running because he doesn't think Kemp or Democratic candidate Stacey Abrams are fit for the job.
I'm David Perdue. I'm running for governor to make sure Stacey Abrams is never governor of Georgia. Make no mistake, Abrams will smile, lie, and cheat to transform Georgia into her radical vision of a state that would look more like California or New York. To fight back, we simply have to be united. Unfortunately, today, we're divided, and Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger are to blame. Look, I like Brian. This isn't personal. It's simple. He has failed all of us and cannot win in November.
For more on this race, let's bring in Greg Bluestein. He's a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and friend of the program. Greg, good to see you again. So President Trump campaigned for former Senator David Perdue, but also instilled doubt in Georgia's election integrity. Now, Perdue ultimately lost to Senator Jon Ossoff. So what are his prospects to beat Governor Kemp?
It's hard to say who's the front runner in this race right now because both of these Republican leaders are iconic figures in Georgia politics. On one hand, you've got Brian Kemp, the first lifelong Republican elected governor in Georgia history, someone who signed in an anti-abortion law that the conservatives had been clamoring for years. On the other hand, you have Senator David Perdue, former Senator David Perdue, who was elected in 2014, became a Republican rock star in his own right. His first cousin was the first Republican governor in Georgia since Reconstruction. It switched parties, a former Democrat who switched parties to the GOP. But he comes from an iconic brand name, too. So both of these are figures with their own vast political circles, their own networks, their own fundraising ability, their own policies. It's going to be a brutal, all-out race right here.
Yeah, brutal indeed. Well, how key will voting rights, you think, and election integrity be to Perdue's campaign?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because on one hand, you've got former Senator Perdue saying that Brian Kemp didn't do enough to fight for Trump, to push back at, to promote these conspiracy theories about election fraud. Governor Kemp refused to call a special session to overturn the election results. And then looming for both of them, whoever wins, is going to be Stacey Abrams, of course, who is a national voting rights advocate who has made voting rights the centerpiece of her agenda, really national agenda, promoting federal voting rights legislation that is stalled in Congress right now, but certainly bringing that fight to Georgia as well. So voting rights is going to be a dominant theme this next year in Georgia politics.
And Greg, help us understand this dynamic. So despite a series of insults from former President Trump and his allies, Governor Kemp continues to speak favorably of Mr. Trump. How much does the former president factor into this race?
Yeah, I mean, the governor is caught in a bind here because he's already drawn the former president's wrath, right? Every chance he gets, it seems like Trump attacks Brian Kemp, including today, in a statement saying that Brian Kemp is unelectable, essentially. But at the same time, Brian Kemp doesn't want to incur even more of that wrath. He doesn't want to pick a fight with Trump's supporters. So he is trying to walk that fine line, saying he supports the president, he supports his agenda, but he's going to run his own race. And that's where it gets really tricky for him, because if those Republican voters who are loyalists to Donald Trump stay home next November, even if Brian Kemp is the nominee, Republicans are in deep, deep trouble against Stacey Abrams. So he's got to find a way to recapture some of Trump's supporters, especially now that David Perdue is in this race.
Yeah, I want to dig in a bit deeper on the political landscape there. So as we said, whoever wins the Republican primary will face Democrat Stacey Abrams, who recently announced her intentions to run again. What has changed in Georgia since her last bid?
Yeah, in 2018, she lost by about 55,000 votes. The biggest thing that's changed is hundreds of thousands of new voters, voters of color, younger voters who helped form that ascendant coalition that helped Democrats win in 2020. The Democrats captured the state in a presidential race for the first time since 1992, and then 9 weeks later swept both Senate runoffs and flipped control of the chamber, winning the first statewide Democratic vote since 2006. So Democrats now have a proof point. They now have evidence that they can win Georgia, and Stacey Abrams helped build that coalition.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's early yet, Greg, but have you heard from Democrats? Are they hoping that President Trump involves himself even more as this race continues, considering, what we saw happen in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are basically pulling out the popcorn and they're enjoying the Republican infighting. They reacted with a sense of bewilderment, confusion, and excitement about David Perdue's plans to challenge Brian Kemp. And really what we've heard from Stacey Abrams in her campaign saying she's not focused on any of the infighting. She's focused on expanding Medicaid, boosting education funding, and expanding healthcare access. And those are all issues that Atlanta Journal-Constitution polls showed overwhelmingly are supported by a broad base of Georgia voters. So she's trying to appeal really to both Democrats and independents right now.
Always fascinating political dynamics in Georgia. Greg Bluestein, really nice to see you again. Thanks so much, Greg.
Thanks for having me.